My brother slept with my wife and got her pregnant, so I divorced her. Now he wants my help because my parents disowned him and gave me all their inheritance. I, 35M, need to vent about the drama that's been unfolding in my family for the past few years. It's a long and complicated story, so bear with me. My brother Nathan, 33M, and I grew up in a small town in the Midwest. Our parents were hardworking middle-class folks. Dad was a high school teacher and Mom ran a small bakery. We weren't rich, but we never wanted for anything. Nathan and I shared a room in our modest 3-bedroom house, and for the most part, we got along well as kids. I have fond memories of us playing in the creek behind our house, catching frogs, and building makeshift dams. We'd spend hours in our treehouse reading comics and planning imaginary adventures. Nathan was always the more outgoing one, making friends easily and charming adults with his quick wit. I was quieter, more introspective, but Nathan always made sure I was included in games and activities with the neighborhood kids. Things started to change when we hit our teenage years. I remember the summer before I started high school. Nathan was 13 and started hanging out with a group of older kids from the next town over. At first, it seemed harmless enough. They'd ride bikes around town, hang out at the abandoned quarry, typical teenage stuff. But then Nathan started coming home late, sometimes smelling of cigarettes or alcohol. Our parents tried to rein him in, but Nathan became increasingly rebellious. He'd talk back, slam doors, and sneak out at night. I'd lie awake at our shared room, waiting for him to climb back through the window, worry he'd get caught or hurt. Meanwhile, I threw myself into my studies and extracurricular activities. I joined the debate team and the math club, determined to get into a good college and make something of myself. Nathan would tease me, calling me a nerd and a teacher's pet, but I could sense an undercurrent of resentment in his words. Our parents always tried to treat us equally, but as Nathan's behavior worsened, they couldn't help but compare us. They'd praise my good grades and responsible behavior, often in contrast to Nathan's latest escapade. I could see how this widened the rift between us, but I didn't know how to fix it. By the time I graduated high school, Nathan and I were like strangers living in the same house. I left for college with a mixture of excitement and guilt, leading my parents to deal with Nathan's increasingly erratic behavior. I thrived in college, studying engineering and making new friends who shared my interest. It was during my sophomore year that I met Rebecca. We were paired up for a project in our Introduction to Ethics class. It was pre-law, brilliant, and beautiful. We started dating a few months later, and I felt like I'd found my other half. Nathan, meanwhile, had dropped out of community college after a single semester. He moved back home, much to our parents' dismay, and cycled through a series of dead-end jobs. He'd work for a few weeks or months and quit or get fired, usually over some petty disagreement with a boss or coworker. Despite his lack of direction, Nathan maintained a sense of entitlement when it came to our family's finances. Our grandparents had left our parents a modest inheritance when they passed away, which our parents had invested wisely over the years. It wasn't a fortune by any means, but it was enough to give them a comfortable retirement. Nathan would often brag about how he was going to get the lion's share of the inheritance, as he was the fun son who actually spent time with our parents. He conveniently ignored the fact that he was living rent-free in their basement, eating their food and constantly borrowing money he never paid back. I remember one Thanksgiving break during my senior year of college. I brought Rebecca home to meet my family, and things were tense from the start. Nathan kept making inappropriate comments about Rebecca, saying things like, "I can see why you locked that down," and making crude gestures when he thought I wasn't looking. I confronted him about it later that night after Rebecca had gone to bed. We were in the kitchen, and I asked him to knock it off and show some respect. He just laughed and said I was being too sensitive. "Lighten up, bro," he said, cracking open another beer. "I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. A girl that hot with a nerd like you should be thanking me for not stealing her away." I was furious, but I didn't want to cause a scene and ruin the holiday for our parents. I walked away, but things were never quite the same between us after that. After graduation, Rebecca and I got married and moved to the city, where we both found jobs. Nathan was my best man, more out of obligation than anything else. His speech at the reception was uncomfortable, full of backhanded compliments and inside jokes that no one else understood. For the next few years, we settled into our careers and started thinking about starting a family. We bought a small house in the suburbs and started trying for a baby. But month after month, nothing happened. We went through a battery of tests and were eventually told that we both had fertility issues that would make conceiving naturally very difficult. Started looking into fertility treatments, a process that was both emotionally and financially draining. I confided in my parents about our struggles, seeking their support and advice. Unfortunately, this information made its way to Nathan, who seemed to view it as another opportunity to make inappropriate jokes at my expense. The last time we had Nathan over for dinner, about 2 years ago, he spent the entire evening making snide comments about my swimmers and offering to help out if we needed a donor. Rebecca was visibly uncomfortable, and I was seething with anger. After he left, Rebecca broke down in tears, saying she couldn't handle being around him anymore. I agreed, and we decided to limit our interactions with Nathan as much as possible. We still saw him at family gatherings, but we kept our distance and tried to avoid one-on-one conversations. Then came the day that changed everything. I had taken a half day off work for a doctor's appointment, but it got canceled at the last minute. I decided to head home early, thinking I might surprise Rebecca with lunch. As I pulled into our driveway, I saw Nathan's beat-up Camaro parked on the street. I thought maybe he'd stop by to apologize for his behavior or to borrow money again. But when I walked into our bedroom, I found them in bed together. The next few hours were a blur. There was shouting, crying, and accusations flying back and forth. Rebecca tried to explain, saying it had only happened a few times, that she was lonely and stressed about the fertility treatments. Nathan just stood there with this smug look on his face, like he finally won some long-standing competition between us. I kicked them both out and filed for divorce the next day. Following months were a haze of lawyers, paperwork, and moving out of the home we had shared. I was a mess, barely functioning at work and avoiding my family as much as possible. About 3 months after I caught them, Nathan called me. He was drunk, his words slurring as he rambled on. I got the gist of it. Becca was pregnant, and he was pretty sure it was his. He had the audacity to ask me if I would be cool about it. Since Rebecca and I had wanted a baby so badly, I hung up on him and blocked his number. I also blocked Rebecca and changed my email address. Couldn't deal with either of them anymore. When my parents found out what happened, they were horrified. They tried to mediate at first, saying that family was important and we should try to work things out, but I was done. I told them I didn't want to hear anything about Nathan or Rebecca ever again. For the past year and a half, I've been focusing on rebuilding my life. Threw myself into work, got a promotion, and even started dating again. Recently, I thought I was finally moving on from all the drama, but last week I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was Nathan. He was sobbing, barely coherent. From what I could gather, our parents had finally had enough of his behavior. They had told him they were cutting him out of their will and leaving everything to me. Nathan was begging me to talk to our parents to convince them to change their minds. He said he was struggling to support Rebecca and the baby. Apparently, it was his after all, and he needed the money. I told him I wasn't getting involved and hung up. But now I'm conflicted. On one hand, I don't owe Nathan or Rebecca anything after what they did to me. On the other hand, there's an innocent child involved now. I don't know what to do. Part of me wants to tell Nathan to figure it out himself, but another part feels guilty about the whole situation. Am I wrong for not wanting to help? Should I talk to my parents about this? I'm lost and could use some outside perspective. It's been about a month since my last post, and a lot has happened. I want to thank everyone who took the time to read my story and offer advice. Your insights really helped me gain some perspective on this messy situation. After much deliberation, I decided not to get involved with Nathan's inheritance drama. Many of you pointed out that it wasn't my responsibility to fix his mistakes, and I agree. I've worked hard to rebuild my life after what he and Rebecca did, and I need to prioritize my own well-being. I did, however, talk to my parents about the situation. I explained that while I understood their desire to support Nathan and Rebecca, I didn't think it was fair to reward him for his behavior at the expense of our relationship. My parents were initially resistant, but after some serious discussion, they agreed to keep their decision to disinherit Nathan. They're still in contact with him, but it's more of a distant, polite relationship. As for me, I've been focusing on moving forward. I've started seeing someone new, and things are going well. It's not easy, and I still have moments when I think about everything that happened, but I'm slowly learning to let go of the past. I appreciate everyone's support and advice during this tough time. It means more than you can know. I wanted to give a final update on the situation. Nathan reached out one last time, saying he and Rebecca were having more trouble than he anticipated. I gave him a small loan, strictly as a gesture of goodwill, with the understanding that it was a one-time thing and he would need to find another solution for future needs. I made it clear that this was not a recurring support arrangement, and he agreed. Rebecca has since moved out of Nathan's life, and he is working on stabilizing his situation. He's tried to reach out to apologize, but I've kept my distance. I'm still processing everything, but I feel more at peace with the decisions I've made. Thank you all for your support and advice. This experience has taught me a lot about boundaries, forgiveness, and moving on. Story 2. When I hit the jackpot in the lottery, my parents tried to snatch it away to secure their favorite child's future, totally messing up mine. When I said no, they kicked me out, but karma had other plans. Growing up, it was clear that I was never the favorite. My younger sister Bella, at 22 years old, was the golden child in the eyes of our parents. From a young age, I witnessed the stark contrast in the way we were treated. When Bella wanted new toys or clothes, our parents would rush out to fulfill her desires without hesitation. Yet when I needed new shoes for school because mine were worn out, I was told to make do. The difference in treatment was evident even in celebrations. For my 10th birthday, I received a modest pack of colored pencils. Bella's 10th birthday, just 2 years later, was marked by an elaborate party with pony rides and a custom cake. This favoritism was not confined to birthdays. It permeated every aspect of our lives. Bella's artwork was always proudly displayed on the fridge, while mine was discarded. When we both brought home report cards, Bella's were celebrated, while mine barely registered. The inequality continued into our teenage years. When I graduated high school, I received a card with $50. Bella's graduation 2 years later was rewarded with a brand new car. I worked multiple part-time jobs to pay my way through community college, while Bella enjoyed a full scholarship to an expensive private university, courtesy of our parents' savings and loans. Despite my achievements, my parents treated every milestone of mine as an afterthought. When I landed my first real job after college, their response was a simple, "That's nice." Bella's internship, on the other hand, was celebrated with a grand party, complete with extended family. The constant favoritism wore me down, leading to severe anxiety and depression. I sought therapy on my own, struggling to cope with the emotional toll. Bella, meanwhile, grew increasingly entitled. She would call our parents at all hours, expecting them to solve her problems. If they didn't drop everything for her, she would guilt-trip them mercilessly. Bella never learned to be self-reliant, because our parents were always there to coddle her. My attempts to discuss the unfair treatment with my parents were always met with dismissal. They accused me of being overly sensitive or jealous of Bella. It became clear that they couldn't see how their actions were harmful. Last year, I finally managed to secure a decent job that allowed me to move out on my own. I was thrilled at the prospect of independence. My excitement was quickly overshadowed by my parents' demands. They pressured me to start saving for Bella's future wedding, even though she wasn't in a relationship. When I pointed out my own expenses and future needs, they accused me of selfishness. They insisted that family should always come first, and that I needed to make sacrifices for Bella's happiness. Although I felt conflicted, I agreed to set aside a portion of my salary for Bella's hypothetical wedding while secretly saving for my own dreams. My dream was to start my own business. I had a solid plan for an apparel company specializing in frocks and dresses for little girls. To achieve this, I needed significant startup capital. I began saving diligently, hoping that one day I could make my dream a reality. Then, a few months ago, something extraordinary happened. I won $500,000 in the state lottery. This was the boost I needed to pursue my entrepreneurial ambitions. However, as soon as my parents learned about my windfall, they made demands. They insisted that I give them the money to send Bella to an elite graduate program abroad. Bella had always dreamed of studying in Europe, and they saw my lottery winnings as a way to make that happen. I was stunned. Here was my chance to change my life. But my parents wanted me to give it all away for Bella's whims. When I told them I planned to use the money to start my business, they flew into a rage. They called me selfish and ungrateful, accusing me of being a terrible son and brother for not prioritizing family. They gave me an ultimatum: either hand over the lottery winnings or move out immediately. It was a tough decision. I chose to leave. I packed up my belongings and found a small apartment across town. Since then, my parents and Bella haven't spoken to me. I sometimes feel guilty and wonder if I made the right choice, but another part of me feels liberated. For the first time in my life, I was free from their control. After moving out, I threw myself into my work. I was determined to save as much money as possible to get my business off the ground. I also wanted to prove to myself that I could succeed on my own terms. About a month after I left, my parents reached out to me. I hoped they wanted to reconcile, but it quickly became apparent that they had an agenda. They called to inform me that Bella had been accepted into her dream graduate program in London. However, the tuition and living expenses were astronomical. They asked me to loan them a large portion of my lottery winnings to fund Bella's education. Promised to pay me back eventually, but I knew that was unlikely. When I hesitated, they laid on the guilt trip. They talked about how Bella's future would be ruined if I didn't help. I stood firm and refused to give them the money. I explained that I was using it to start my own business, but they accused me of being selfish once again. My mom even said, "I guess the money has changed you. You used to care about your family." That stung deeply. I realized that no matter what I did, it would never be enough for them. I made the decision to cut ties. I told them that I was done being their ATM and needed to put myself first. They couldn't respect my choices. We needed some time apart. It was a lot of yelling and crying. My dad said I was dead to him if I didn't help Bella. I had to hang up on them mid-tirade, one of the hardest things I've ever done. After that call, I blocked their numbers for a while. I needed space to process everything and focus on my goals. Threw myself into planning my business launch, researching, networking with other entrepreneurs, and putting together a solid business plan. About a month ago, I took the plunge and quit my day job to focus on my company full-time. It was scary, but exhilarating to finally be in control of my future. I spent weeks setting up my workshop and getting everything in order. I hired part-time seamstresses to help with production. We started small with an online store, but I planned to expand into brick-and-mortar locations. Things went well. My first collection of girls' frocks and dresses was almost ready to launch. I was nervous, but excited to see how they would be received. Throughout this process, I had moments of doubt. I wondered if I was making a huge mistake, but then I reminded myself of how far I'd come and how much happier I was now that I was living life on my own terms. I still hadn't heard from my parents or Bella, but I was learning to be okay with the distance and focusing on building the life I wanted. About 3 months after moving out, my parents called me. I was hesitant to answer. Something told me I should. When I picked up, I could tell something was wrong. My mom was crying, and my dad sounded more subdued than I'd ever heard him. They informed me that Bella had gotten into serious trouble. Bella had been working part-time at a local boutique while applying to grad schools. However, her extravagant lifestyle had led her to start stealing money from the cash register. She'd been caught red-handed and arrested. Parents were frantic as they didn't have enough money for bail or a lawyer. They called to beg for my help. I was conflicted. Part of me wanted to refuse, feeling that they had made their bed and should lie in it. However, I knew that jail could be a dangerous place, especially for a young woman. After thinking it over, I decided to help, on my terms. I agreed to pay Bella's bail, made it clear that this was a one-time thing. I told my parents I'd transfer the money directly to the bail bondsman, and made it clear that this didn't mean I was opening my wallet for them anytime soon. In the end, winning the lottery was not just about the money. It was about the chance to redefine my life. It allowed me to break free from the constraints of favoritism and to pursue my own dreams. While the journey was fraught with challenges, it also brought growth and self-discovery. I am now living a life that reflects my true self and my own values. I hope that my story serves as an inspiration to others who might be struggling with their own family dynamics or facing obstacles in pursuing their dreams. Sometimes, the most significant changes come from within. It is up to us to seize the opportunities that come our way and make the most of them.